Hello, everyone. So in today's video, I was planning on talking for like 10 minutes or so about balance in fighting games, and I ended up talking for about 30 minutes. So instead of, going through and curating this perfect little, you know, 15-minute video for you, I figured, hey, why don't I just let like the unfiltered part of me just kind of take this video and run with it. So I'm going to keep this fairly short. The audio that you're going to hear is unedited. The matchups in the background are all matchups and clips that have all appeared on my channel before. So I hope that you guys just enjoy, some kind of fun thoughts that I've been having about balance in fighting games. So without further ado, please enjoy. This is my video, Balance in Mind. Enjoy the video, guys.
Hello, YouTube, people of Earth, and everyone else. Welcome to the channel. I've realized that it is 2024, and I have been uploading videos for a good period of time now. I believe about 3 years, even though I have removed many of the videos on my channel because I don't want them. But I realized I don't think I've ever officially introduced myself on this channel. Especially now that I have very few videos where my face and my voice are actually a part of the video. So, my name is Aiden. I go by A-Train or Subaru Goober depending on the game and the context. I am a musician. I am a music major at UW Green Bay in Wisconsin, and I really love fighting games. It took me a long time to realize that that was the kind of game that I wanted to play. I used to play a lot of FPS games, but I've kind of fallen off that just with kind of the state of that genre of games. I was not happy with the way that community acted, and I just wanted to change and make some content that I really enjoy. I also am a huge Elden Ring fan. I'm not like a Soulsborne player for the most part, but I have played that game, and I have a good few videos, including me beating it on my channel, as well as mostly Tekken and Street Fighter content with a little bit of Mortal Kombat. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because I wanted to just talk to you guys today about a topic that's been in fighting games for a long time, but it's been something that has come up more recently because of some certain happenings with a couple of the main 3 fighting games, that being Street Fighter, Tekken, and Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat has had a couple of balance changes already, and Street Fighter has not, and it will not be getting a balance patch until after, it seems like, Akuma comes out, who is coming out sometime in the winter of this year the spring of this year. I think I have kind of a hot take, and I think a lot of players disagree with me, even though I think a lot of like higher level players don't. I think there's a lot of the population of the game that does disagree with me. So my big hot take is I think that this is the most balanced vanilla fighting game that has ever been released. I mean, at least that I've played. I know when Tekken 7 came out, and this was before I was playing it at all regularly, it came out in a fairly balanced state, but it wasn't a super exciting state, I think, for a lot of people. I also know that in the game's history, it kind of became a big issue that there were many DLC characters that were really ridiculously strong, and some of which were literally glitched and broken. I didn't play during that time. I pretty much came to Tekken 7 after a long time of not playing it, and after almost all of those changes had been made and all of the fixes had been put into the game. So, I'm not really going to talk about Tekken. I wanted to talk about specifically Street Fighter 6 because that is the game that I have been playing a lot. So I want to talk about my opinions on Street Fighter 6's balancing. So like I said, I think it's the best vanilla balancing in a fighting game that I have seen. I know that there's a lot of glitches and a lot of stuff in other games, but there really hasn't been any real big issues. I know that they had to iron out a few kinks when the game first dropped. I think the first 3 patches came within like 2 months of it, but they were mostly bug fixes, and that's because they made a really polished game on launch. So I actually think that this game has been so ridiculously well balanced because of the polish that they gave this game. So for some context, I don't play that many of the characters in the game, but I've played enough that I've run into every character at least once or twice in ranked. So let's just talk about my characters quick and why I think this game is so unbelievably balanced. So I am a gold rank for both DJ and Jury. I'm a silver rank with Ken, I'm a bronze rank with Ryu, and an iron rank with JP. Now, I understand that those aren't super impressive ranks for anything other than just, this is kind of an average player's perspective. And I think that because this game is so ridiculously well balanced, that it's actually kind of a hot topic, because a lot of these things that are being said about this game are complaining because of, I think, a lack of knowledge of what's actually, like, what balance is. And balance does not mean that every character is the same exact strength. It means that each character has their own strengths and their own weaknesses. So both of my lower level Shoto players, which are Ken and Ryu, they're both really, really balanced, because they, for the most part, don't have a huge amount of damage output until you start getting their bigger combos. And I will be talking about that later when I talk about specific characters more in depth. But those characters, they have really well balanced combo damage for their bread and butters. I believe most of Ken's basic combos, even with one EX move, it's hitting just above 30 as far as percent of damage goes. Jury is actually harder because her bread and butter really doesn't do a whole lot as far as damage. I mean, I think the biggest bread and butter meterless move or meterless combo you can have is, I believe, 23 or 24%, and then you have to start using resources to expand that damage. And JP, of course, is a hot topic with a lot of players, even high-level players to a degree. But I think that JP is actually pretty fair and balanced, because he has a lot of strengths. He has a lot of strengths in both, he can keep you full screen, he can combo you in the corner like crazy, and those are the two things he wants to do. But if you are practiced enough to move through projectiles really easy, if you know your character's form of projectile evasion, or you just happen to make a good read, or you know the patterns of JP, and again, matchup knowledge is something I'll get to later, you can beat even a good JP because you know how to counter it. It's not that he's so ridiculously strong. A good JP is oppressive, but he's not so unrealistically strong as other fighting game characters have been in the past. So I actually think of all the characters, I think that JP is balanced as far as when you know the matchup and you understand your own character as well as JP. Now, that doesn't mean that a person that's never run into a JP before is going to immediately know how to beat all of his moves. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that JP is a good character as far as balance goes because he's got the two things that he wants to do. Those two things, while easy in concept because of all of the tools he has, his tools are actually really, really hard to use. And that's actually kind of the thing that I want to talk about with most of the characters, is that they have tools that they want you to play with. Even though there is a lot of freedom of expression in this game, there's also a lot of times where a character will have a thing that they want to do. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, and while we're on the topic of JP, I want to throw Guile in there as well, because Guile is one of the most notorious zoners in Street Fighter. I will never, ever, ever not see Guile come up on the new challenger, or the here's a new challenger, or here's the loading screen, or here's the, I will never ever run into a Guile and think, oh, this is going to be easy. And I know that there's a lot of people that say, oh, Guile's so hard to fight against, he's just got so much zoning. But actually, he's a really, really, really simple character, and that's what makes him, in a lot of ways, very, very strong, is that he's much more simple than JP. JP, you have to have the patterns down. Guile has to think somewhat about what he's going to do, but he really just needs to start throwing sonic booms and all of his other projectiles, because that's just what his character is. And then he has a good anti-air and real good combo damage and good combo potential. So my thoughts on both JP and Guile is that they're actually really, really, really balanced. Now, I know a lot of people think that Aki is a grossly weak character because you have to do so much setup to get her combo damage to really shine. Because, combos are the big deal in fighting games. Even though they're not the only thing you have to think about, that's what you want. You want to be able to get your combos. A lot of people thought that JP and Aki were going to basically be hard counters to each other because they could both be full screen. But Aki turned out that she was mostly setup, and JP is a lot of execution. Again, JP's game plan in a lot of ways is very, very simple. I either want you in the corner with me just kicking you and portals and spikes and juggling you and hitting my level 3 or my level 2, depending on what the situation is. Whereas Aki, you have to set up the blossom puddles, and you have to set up all the bubbles in the air, and you actually have to keep pressure on while having a lot of slow moving projectiles and a lot of traps that you have to set your opponent up for. Which means that if you know Aki really well and the opponent doesn't, you are really strong. Especially if you know how to do her bigger damage combos, because she does have them, they're just really hard to set up. And that's what I think a lot of people are missing with the Aki character, is that they try her out, they think, oh, she's gonna be the JP killer, and that was kind of the big talk, was a lot of people thought she was gonna be the JP killer, and then she wasn't, because she plays almost completely opposite of JP. JP has a lot of fast moving, just frantic projectiles and just kind of vomits all of this at you and keeps a lot of stuff coming and keeps the momentum going, whereas Aki, you have to be patient and you have to sit and you have to wait and you have to set your opponent up, and then once they fall into the trap, then suddenly, boom, now you have 60-70% gone, and now you're way behind, and she's draining your life still because she's got you in the poison blossom, and she can just avoid you for a little bit because she's doing damage to you, and the only way to counteract that damage is to do damage to her, which is hard to do if she's actually actively avoiding you, and she's and the player behind Aki is good. So in a lot of ways, Aki is actually one of the other fair and balanced characters in the game. She's just really, really difficult. Now, easy and difficult is another conversation entirely, because I think a lot of people kind of confuse what's easy and difficult in fighting games. Now, a basic understanding of a fighting game is you have to play offense, you have to play defense, and you have to pick a character that best works for your style of play. Now, of course, that's where we get into archetypes, and that's something that's, a completely different topic. But I wanted to talk about a couple characters that are known as like normal, like standard level difficulty. Like, this is the character that you should start out with if you have fighting game experience, but you're not like the top level, and that's DJ and Ryu. A lot of people have complained about my main, DJ. And I just want to say, I don't mean to downplay my character, because I do think I think he's a really strong character. I think he is S tier, but I don't think people realize how much time you have to spend learning his basics before you can really get into his advanced stuff. And yes, he has a lot of damage coming out of like drive rushes, and his drive rush is really fast if you know how to do the advanced, timing drive rush, which is a really good mechanic, and I'm glad that that's in the game. But you have to know that to be really fast, and if you don't know that, if all you know is you have to hold parry and then dash forward, well, then you're going to get like an 8-frame drive rush parry window, and then you're slower by just simply holding and then doing the dash. But if you know how to use his drive rush, now suddenly you've opened up a ton of options for yourself. You might see in the background when some of DJ's matches are coming up that I use a lot of feints when I throw his drive rush, because it's such a good move to put pressure on somebody that's maybe playing a little defensive. So maybe if you feint an attack and they throw something and then you punish that, that's such a good reason why DJ is really strong. Now, I will say I do think that DJ is among like the A tier characters, maybe even A+ or S. But I think that because his moveset is very technical and there's not a lot of cancelable moves, you have to really know his character, because he has a lot of really hard aspects to him. On top of that, he's a charge character, which means that you also have to consider how that all works and how that mechanic works, and know what his different charge moves do. So that's kind of where I think DJ falls down into maybe A-, maybe B+ tier, just because he has so many different technical aspects to his character that I think a lot of people don't know about. So that's kind of where I'm at, but his combo damage is insane when you can do the big combos and when you know all of the routes to get into them. And that's just something that in a lot of ways you just learn over time. I mean, there's nothing but learning with DJ. You have to know his moveset. He's actually harder than most of the normal difficulty characters, because his moveset is complex enough that he's not just a Guile clone with a little bit different sauce, Ryu, on the other hand, he actually can do a similar amount of big combo level 3 damage. But unlike DJ, he's not a charge character. He's not even really that execution heavy. Now, I know that some people will be like, oh, you don't know how to do the micro walk combo, you're just using basic frames and all that, and you're right. Like, I'm not even like all the Ryu stuff that I have from like the 1 or 2 videos that I played as him. I really didn't know anything about like how his combos worked. Just that, okay, these moves work in combos, and I can do these, bread and butters, and then just have decent enough reactions to make it into, a combo video or whatever. But Ryu does a lot of damage when he gets like a punish counter into into his drive rush cancels and all that. But Ryu in a lot of ways is a lot easier than DJ, just based off of you need a little less execution and you just need to know how the timings in Street Fighter work. That's kind of my hot take, is that I actually think DJ is harder than Ryu, and I think a lot of people would agree just because of his charge moves. But my opinion is this: I think that Ryu is harder than Ken and Luke because Ryu has to be patient. You can't just drive rush, drive rush, drive rush, drive rush. But he's actually easier to use for most people because he's got good offense and good defense. You just have to know how to use both. Whereas with Ken, and I will talk about him, he's actually a much easier Shoto than even Luke, from what I can tell. He's got, like, Luke has a lot of difficult things, and I actually think that he has a lot of Ryu and a lot of Ken in his moveset, and I mean, that's obviously kind of the point, but Ken is nuanced in a lot of ways. I mean, he has the run and he has the Jinrai kicks now, but he's a lot easier in that his game plan is mostly, okay, I need to know my buttons. Okay, now I know my buttons. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put you in a corner. I'm gonna carry you to the corner with the run Tatsu kicks. And then suddenly now you're in the corner against a character with a lot of plus frames and a good decent amount of mix-ups. And most Ken players at this point already know a lot about Ken, so he's already going to be really, really useful. So, but I think one of his big drawbacks is that he is an older character, and his mix-ups are pretty easy to pick up on, even though he's got throw loops. But Ken is one of those characters that's balanced without being broken, but without being weak. I think he's just kind of got no weakness, and I think that's what a lot of people see. I think that a lot of the weakness for Ken players is that everybody knows their matchup at this point. Everybody knows that what they're going to try and do is throw you in the corner, and they're going to throw loop you, they're going to Jinrai loop you, they're going to put you in, you know, God knows what combo, because everything with Ken combos. Ken just has this incredible strong moveset, but he's not the strongest character, and I don't believe that there is a good way. I don't believe there's a good way to argue that Ken is the strongest character in the game. I don't even think that he can be argued as being a ridiculously strong character. I know a lot of people are like, hey, nerf Ken, nerf Ken, nerf Ken. It's just simply, you need to be ready to fight somebody that's just going to keep moving forward no matter what you do. Because Ken players play Ken because he's the fiery spirit. He's the one that runs at you and does everything in his power to put you in the corner and keep you there. And usually Ken players are pretty good at that because they get a lot of good, you know, Jinrai stuff. They, again, the Shoryuken is a really strong anti-air. While the Hadouken is a fairly weak projectile, it's still a projectile, and you still have to know that they can put that trap out there where they're in neutral and you're still jumping over a fireball, and they can move in and Shoryuken you. That's just got to be the matchup, you know. So kind of moving on to like matchups and knowledge checks. That's kind of the big thing with Ken. That's kind of the big thing with fighting games in general. If you don't know the matchup, you are in a lot of trouble, because especially at higher ranks, when the other person might know your matchup better because they've seen your character more times, or they've even labbed your character because they struggled against that character, you know, it's somebody else playing him. So a lot of people kind of don't think like this, is that it's not just the knowledge of your character that gets you wins. It's the knowledge of the other character that you're fighting against, because they have something different. They have a different plan. And the other nuance is that a lot of times it's another player with a totally different mindset from the last one that you fought with that character. Now, obviously they have the same options as that other player, but that second player might use different options than the first one did. And it's just a part of the game. You're going to fight different players as well as different characters. So that brings me to the discussion of, well, what do I do in that situation? What if I don't know the opponent's matchup? Well, use your matchup. That's where you can kind of be like, okay, I know my character, and if you don't know my character, I can use this one thing to really mess with you and really make you think about doing a lot of the stuff that you're gonna try and do. So you can do knowledge checks where it's like, okay, well, I know this move is like +3 on block, right? And maybe that's a bad example, but this move is +3 on block. If you press anything, if your opponent presses anything, you will land anything up to 7 frames, because their jab will come out 7 frames after your impact frame. So you have to know your knowledge checks, even if you don't know anybody else's knowledge checks. It helps when you know other people's knowledge checks, because that means you're in a lot of advantage there, because they think, oh, well, he might not know this, and then you know it, and then they're like, oh no, this is a problem. This guy knows this knowledge check. I need to use a different knowledge check. And that's why learning a bunch of different knowledge checks, and I know that I keep saying that, knowledge checks are really important, especially in as competitive landscape as fighting games, because it's just simply nicer when you know a matchup, when you know your moves, when you know your opponent's moves, and especially when you know frame data. And then, I mean, that's a different subject too. You're gonna run into a lot of knowledge checking and a lot of different matchup knowledge based on your rank in the competitive landscape of fighting games, because there's going to be some people that have been playing for 10 minutes, there's going to be some people that have been playing for 10 years, and there are going to be some people that are, you know, ridiculously good at the game, that they just know more knowledge checks than you, and you might know more knowledge checks than someone else, right? So in the ranked modes and in the competitions, you're just gonna kind of run into a lot of different people, and you just have to know, you just have to be able to make reads, right? You have to recognize, okay, this person struggles with this part of the game, I have to use that, and that's okay. You know, that's how a lot of the pros, that's how a lot of professionals do their matchups, is they sit and they wait for their professional opponent to not know something, or to know something wrong, or to do a knowledge check that they think is a knowledge check, because most people don't know about that certain thing, but the one person that does is going to be their foil. So kind of in wrapping up, there's a lot that affects balance, and it's more than just the mechanics in the game. It's a lot more mind based, and I think that there's a lot of like mentality stuff that can be talked about in the balance, like in a video game, because if you know something that your opponent just simply does not, or your opponent knows something that you just simply don't, that can wildly change the matchup way more than, you know, what can my character do versus what their character can do, and we're both just gonna go meet in the middle and press buttons. There's a lot more to it than that, and I think that there needs to be some understanding there from the whole community that it's not just about, oh, this character has a really strong this or a really weak this, and this character is way too easy to play, and this character is just way too oppressive. And I think that there just needs to be kind of a complete switch around on the narrative. I just really think that people need to be a little more open-minded and use the knowledge that the game can give you if you choose to accept the knowledge that it's presenting. So, and I mean, and kind of wrapping this all up, I think that Street Fighter 6 is a ridiculously balanced game because of this. Because yes, there are characters like Zangief that struggle to beat a character like JP or Guile, because Zangief moves very slowly and he struggles in a lot of ways to defeat things that Guile and JP do, because okay, so you set up a trap for Zangief and suddenly okay, now you've beaten Zangief. Okay, this Zangief has to get past all of your projectiles to get close to you to do his damage, right? And that's the struggle with Zangief. But there are Zangief players that know how to beat JP and know how to beat Guile, because those are the matchups that mostly affect, those, like, you need to win 3 out of 10, to be considered a normal Zangief against JP and Guile, because you're only going to win mostly like 3 out of 10, because the other person should beat you 7-3 in most first to or like up to 10 matches, right? So again, in summary, there's a lot more to game balance than the mechanics in the game, because it depends on the players and it depends on the people controlling those characters, because it's about knowledge. And I think that the fighting game community, in like the average player base, needs to accept that.